This episode is brought to you by the European Coworking Assembly. We are everything Coworking Europe. If you head to the Coworking Assembly website, you can connect with our World Coworking, European Freelancers Week, Coworking Symposium, Coworking Library, and Coworking Tools.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ashley Proctor, and I am with Coworking Canada and Creative Blueprint, and I'm one of the co-founders of the Coworking Idea Project. If you are new to the Coworking Idea Project, we're an international collective of coworking operators and associations, community organizers, collaborative consultants, and we are committed to making the coworking industry more inclusive, more diverse, more equitable, and more accessible. And we believe that by working collaboratively and internationally, we can make a ripple effect throughout the industry and that our actions matter. So each of us have the opportunity to make decisions in our businesses, in our organizations, in our communities. And we often have the privilege of a platform or access to a larger network who we can also influence by changing our behavior and by leading by example. These small changes lead to larger impact, and ideally, our market and our industry will collectively begin to know better, to do better, and to demand better. So each month, we invite an individual or an organization to issue a challenge, something that we can all do to take action, whether it be large or small, to have an impact in the co-working movement. And this month, our challenge facilitator is Jerome Chang, and I'll turn it over to him to introduce this month's challenge. Hi, Jerome.
Hi. Thank you for inviting me, Ashley. This is been a topic I've been wanting to address again. Some of you may remember that back in July 2021, a colleague of mine, Siobhan Sherry, and I issued a challenge about incorporating more diversity into our various facets of co-working. And I thought with 2023, we can narrow that focus a little more and talk about the upcoming fall season of conferences around the world, domestically in the US, in Europe, specific countries, and all that. And I think we can disrupt the status quo quite a bit by demanding some more diversity in these conferences. Again, there's many aspects of co-working, and the way I see co-working, the co part as community, and community should be fundamentally inclusive across all demographics, and part of that is a diversity of ethnicities. As someone who's attended, the last dozen years worth of conferences, I should qualify that it was only in the US, but I think the US ones do represent a wide variety of what's out there in the world. And my counterparts in Europe and other countries have all reiterated the same, experiences and perceptions of these conferences. And that is that the attendance, the panelists, all around, the people involved in these conferences could use a lot more diversity, could be more inclusive. I'm happy to see that there has been some uptick in the diversity at the attendees, but setting an example through leadership, through being on stage, through speaking out, through sponsorships, I think those actions can be greatly improved. And I hope that this challenge will remind people of the challenge we issued 2 years ago that, in the closing of the pandemic, even though we're technically still in a pandemic, but a lot of things are returning to normal, that let's return to a new normal where we close a chapter on a previous lack of diversity, lack of inclusion, and let's open a new chapter where it is apparently much more intentional and much more inclusive as an outcome.
Yeah, I think the intentionality is really important to point out because every organizer has an opportunity to define the conference or the gathering, and an opportunity to select and curate speakers, and an opportunity to set the price point or the location. And so there are a lot of opportunities to make sure that our co-working events are inclusive, diverse, representative, sustainable. We can commit to a certain kind of inclusive community and holding space in our codes of conduct. And I do want to acknowledge that there are some smaller operators and smaller conferences around the world, particularly ones organized by alliances, that are really paying attention to these things and intentionally programming. And granted, it may be a bit easier to do at a smaller scale. These are still decisions that each of us have to make. And so I think it's important that we collaborate as well on the things that we know are working and different policies we can hold as organizers and put in place for our organizations to ensure that these conferences are meeting the mark.
Yeah, speaking of the size of these conferences, I'd like to look at it, our related industry, real estate. There is a very large U.S. organization. I think they're semi-global, at least in the U.K. And in the U.S. It's called BizNow, and it's just straight up core real estate topics. And I noticed that early 2020, if not 20, or even 2021, but I think it was 2020. I noticed that every single time they announced a breakfast session, a lunch session, all day session, they showed the panelists or speakers involved, they were diverse. I mean, we're talking about the most traditional, most fractionalized real estate type industry, such as real estate. And really, to be honest, doesn't have the best reputation in terms of inclusion and diversity. This organization that is the most prominent within the real estate industry, they have done it repeatedly. Every single time I look at announcements for their events, their panelists and the participants are diverse. So, gosh, if they can do it, and they're large and they're for profit, we can do it.
Yeah, I agree. And we've seen a lot of progress in terms of having these conversations at the unconference sessions, in the hallways, in events that are being held adjacent to these conferences. But what we're really asking for here is to elevate these issues into the organizing team and onto the main stage. This conversation has been going on for years. We've been trying to call people in to this movement, asking people to do better, providing opportunities and introductions to a diverse and representative list of speakers, trying to elevate speakers or offer panels that elevate and amplify a diverse representation of the operators in this industry. But we still see intentional exclusion and power being elevated on stage. And so I think it's time again for demanding this diversity in a new way. We've been doing a lot of educating and asking for change. And so I really do want to note the shift in tone from requesting or asking or to demanding. And so, it's not just the operators that are responsible. We've made the case for profitability. We've made the case for diversity and inclusion, and that being our strength as an industry and as a movement. If that's still not enough for an organizer to change, I think it's up to the other players that are involved to make change. And so who is responsible for changing the status quo and ensuring diverse representation? I think, Jerome, you've got a couple of ideas of who we might be able to call in to assist.
Well, the conference itself is a community involving various participants. Of course, the event organizer, we have the sponsors, we have panelists, speakers, moderators, and such. And then we have the attendees. All those people should at this point be much more intentional about with whom they engage in these events. And if it doesn't represent who they want to be or who they are, then they walk away having aided and abetted, intentionally or not, aided and abetted, bad acts. And we're asking everyone to just be much more aware, much more intentional, and let's follow through with our intentions with actual actions this time around. We have the fall season coming up, a few months away. And as we're planning for booking a travel, booking a hotel, buying tickets, and seeing which conferences you may attend, please reassess which ones you will attend based on what will represent you better.
Yeah, I think it's a great point around the specific actions we can take. And so as an attendee, we can wait to see the speaker list instead of buying an early bird ticket showing support for an event without knowing if the representation of the speakers is going to be diverse or inclusive. As a sponsor, we can say that we'd be happy to sponsor as long as there is a commitment to diversity and representation, or to ensuring that the content is co-created, even with the local community, for example. And I think also as a speaker, one of the things that we've heard in the past, and I know Hector Colonis has often spoke about his commitment, the pledge that he signed, and I think others are excited to do so this month, take a similar pledge to not appear or speak on a panel that isn't a balanced panel, so a gender diverse panel or a representative panel across many regions, for example. And so we can all find at least one way to make a commitment and to stick to that action to insist upon change.
Yeah, and even deeper in there is the hope that, we don't have someone, a person of color on stage or as a moderator as the token minority. I think if we can reframe our mind and value someone who hasn't yet had a chance to speak, but is a person of color, someone who's local, perhaps someone with a new vantage point. I mean, all capable of speaking. They just need that chance to be able to speak. But please, be careful about bringing someone on stage and being the token minority.
Yeah, and I think that's actually part of this challenge and part of the reasoning for this challenge, because there's been some, I think, efforts in the past to be perhaps more representative, but the efforts cause more harm than good when we're tokenizing folks. And so absolutely, I encourage all of our conference organizers to be thinking really clearly about their intention. And if this isn't an area they're comfortable working in, there are a lot of idea experts, there are a lot of curators, there are a lot of folks who are tapped into these communities who know the experts. And I agree about taking chances on folks. Every one of us were given a chance in our early careers to speak about what it is that we were doing and working on and what our vision is for this movement and for this world. But also there are just so many extreme cases of talent and success in the BIPOC community that are simply being overlooked and excluded. So it's not like that talent isn't there. Understandably, folks all along the process have been excluded from opportunities. And so we aren't seeing, a fully equitable balance equal balance of all genders and all identities being represented in terms of ownership and a really significant investment in the co-working industry. But we actually need to take intentional action to make that difference, and otherwise we end up with the status quo. And so doing nothing at this point is allowing the status quo to exist.
It's honestly just negligent. So let's summarize. It's both top down and bottom up, and everything in between. Top down are event organizers, sponsors, and even the moderators, or the panelists, but primarily moderators. And then from bottom up are the attendees. So we're asking everyone to reassess buying that ticket, and so or have assurance that this conference you'll attend is going to be as diverse as you think will represent you. I think as the moderator, I found that moderators are often just as influential in who is on that panel you're moderating. I ask you to reconsider whom you ask to be on a panel, even if it's last minute, to be just as intentional as you do with your personal and professional lives, because this being on stage, you're being on stage like the panelists. It's gonna the outcome is going to represent who you are. And then for the sponsors, please reconsider how this conference is going to reflect upon your brand and for your customers who may not even attend the conference and will perceive you and change their minds about whether or not to use your product or service. And the event organizers, I mean, this is your company, this is your for-profit business. You want the conference attendees to walk away thinking, yet again, this may lack in diversity, it may lack in inclusion, and may lose sponsorships and attendees for the next round. So top down, event organizers and sponsors, bottom up, moderators and attendees, everyone is involved here.
Yeah, I think it's really important that you're pointing that out, both approaches. And so this is an industry, this is a movement problem. It's not just an event problem, and we're all contributing to it, even if we're contributing by staying silent. And I think the last thing I just wanted to come back to was the financial component, because I know a lot of folks think like, what's my one little ticket in a $100,000 conference? But a small group of people can make a significant amount of difference. And a couple of sponsors can make a significant amount of impact for an organizer as well. And so if we aren't seeing the change that we're demanding, there are other ways. And I think those financial ways are extremely important to back up our values here.
Yeah, you just add it up. An attendee will pay $600, $800, $900 for a ticket. Let's say $800. And if a dozen of you decide to hold and reassess, 12 times 8, that's almost $10,000, $9,600. For every $10,000 block of lack of tickets, is a significant portion of the conference budget. Many conferences are 100K plus. So you could conceivably make it, an impact on 10%. Sponsors pay $5,000, $10,000 a piece. So, that could be another 10%. So, really want to, we're really trying to be careful here to not insist on some kind of universal protest whatsoever. We just want everyone to really understand what they're walking into. And to reassess if this represents themselves. Many of us have been very quietly, privately, discreetly asking all the various participants involved in these conferences for many years now. And some have heard us, some have heard not. Some of them have not heard us. And in a variety of messengers. So it's not just, sometimes a messenger can make the difference. It's been a complete variety of messengers. So I believe the message resonates, and let's get more messengers out there in all formats.
I love the approach. And I want to thank you again for bringing up this topic. I know that it's a difficult one, and I think it's important, again, to approach it holistically, that we all have a role to play in this. This isn't an organizer problem. It's an industry or a movement problem. So, I really appreciate bringing this topic to the forefront again, Jerome, and for also the work you do with the IDEA Project and in surrounding conversations with Lexi and other organizations around these topics. And I'd love to see more champions following in your footsteps and using the IDEA Project as an entry point for conversations that make changes like this. So for those who are following along, you can find our blog post and all the information, also a checklist to take this challenge at coworkingidea.org. And you can join us on the last Wednesday of the month for our free IDEA conversation. We're going to have guest speakers. Jerome will be there, as well as Siobhan Cherry, who will be joining us, who issued the challenge in 2021, coming back for a bit of a review and update and to talk about some actions we can take as a group. So if you would like to work on some of these policies or work on strategies for increasing the diversity and representation at co-working events, we'd love to see you at the end of the month. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you again, Jerome.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks.